Jack Ma is one of the few entrepreneurs in the world who have been able to create over $1 trillion worth of value in the marketplace. Last year, in October of 2020, Jack's companies were valued at a total of $1.326 trillion. But within just 8 months, his empire shrunk to $696 billion, meaning that he shed $630 billion in 8 months. That's the same as $78 billion per month. Since then, things have only gotten worse, as Alibaba has shed another $150 billion in the past 4 months, putting Jack's total market cap loss at $780 billion. So, what in the world happened to Jack Ma? 1 year ago, Jack was killing it. He was the richest man in China, he was a massive celebrity, and he was about to conduct the world's largest public offering with his finance company, the Ant Group. But all of this would change overnight. On October 24, 2020, Jack gave a speech preceding the IPO of the Ant Group. He shared his thoughts on the future of fintech, along with a bit of criticism of the Chinese financial system. Jack said, quote, "We cannot regulate the future with yesterday's means. There's no systemic financial risks in China because there's no financial system in China. The risks are a lack of systems." Now, to most of us, this wouldn't seem like a big deal. Compared to the things Americans say about Joe Biden and Donald Trump, Jack's remarks are baby talk. But the Chinese government would beg to differ. Nowadays, given the rapid financial and technological advancements in China, many of us consider China to be a rapidly developing country, if not a developed country. I mean, in terms of GDP, the general consensus is that China overtaking the US is just a matter of when, not if. So you would think that China's political system is also quite advanced. But this is not the case at all. You see, the Chinese government is run by the CCP, or the Chinese Communist Party, and this isn't just for show either. They strongly believe in communist ideologies and principles. The reason that they embraced a capitalistic economy is because they realized that they couldn't keep up with Western countries without capitalism. But don't let that fool you. The CCP keeps a close eye on the free market, and they shut down anything and everything that they consider a threat. Jack's statement in October was a red flag that the CCP had given Jack way too much freedom, and they decided that it was time to put him and all of his billionaire friends in their place. About a week later, on November 2nd, Jack was invited to a closed-door meeting with Chinese financial regulators. At the time, this just seemed like a formality. The Ant Group was about to go public, and the meeting was presumably about the IPO. The next day, though, it would become clear that the meeting was not so benign. Ant Group announced that they would be canceling the IPO, and that they would be returning funds to investors who had front-ran the IPO. The Wall Street Journal later revealed that Jack offered a portion of the company to the CCP to keep as long as they wanted, but the CCP declined his offer, and all of this was just the beginning. After the IPO cancellation, the CCP began to crack down on the Ant Group with regulation. The Ant Group was ordered to create a subsidiary holding company that followed the rules of the banking industry. This way, China's massive state-owned banks could purchase stakes in the subsidiary group. The CCP also targeted the Ant Group's greatest asset, which was their consumer data. The Ant Group had gathered financial data on billions of consumers throughout the company's history, and this was one of their key competitive advantages. The CCP branded this data as a monopoly on information and forced the Ant Group to share this data with the rest of the Chinese financial industry. While the Ant Group was bending to the CCP's every wish, Jack Ma had disappeared. He didn't make any public appearances or speeches. He completely stopped tweeting. In fact, he hasn't tweeted to this day. And Jack would miss the finals of his own talent show where he was a judge. There is a lot of speculation that Jack was brought into custody and given a shakeup during this time period, but there's no concrete proof thus far. Moving back to the Ant Group, the CCP continued their demolition of the once thriving fintech company. One of the crown jewels of the Ant Group was their money market fund, which was at one point the largest in the world. The CCP had already been stifling the fund for a few years at this point, but this time they didn't even have to do anything. All of the regulation the CCP forced onto the Ant Group understandably spooked investors of the fund, and they would leave in droves. In the first quarter of 2021, the fund shrunk 18% to just under 1 trillion yuan. This adds up to almost a 50% decline from the peak of the fund at the end of 2017. On the bright side, Jack finally resurfaced into the public's view in early February. Jack was spotted playing golf at the Sun Valley Golf Resort. And with that, the CCP decided to momentarily leave the Ant Group and Jack Ma alone and move on to Jack's other assets. In April, the CCP hit Alibaba with a record $2.8 billion antitrust fine. Apparently, Alibaba had eliminated and restricted competition within the online retailing space. Now, I actually think there's a bit of truth here, as Alibaba is arguably a monopoly just like Amazon. But Alibaba's dominance hasn't really changed over the past several years, so this is clearly just another hit on Jack. Alibaba put out a statement shortly after that they would, quote, ensure its compliance with determination. Moving forward, the CCP took aim at Alibaba's web browser called UC Browser. UC Browser was the second most popular browser in China with over 400 million active users, only beaten out by Chrome. In March, the CCP went ahead and removed the app from the App Store. They didn't provide any reasons as to why or give any warning. They straight up just deleted the app. To make things worse, Jack's actions didn't just screw over himself, but also most Chinese tech companies. The CCP was enacting very similar punishments to all tech billionaires in the country. Take Didi for instance. Didi is basically the Chinese Uber, and they have major players backing them, including Apple, Tencent, and Uber. The company was planning an IPO during the summer, and though the CCP didn't block the IPO, blocking the IPO would have likely been the better outcome for Didi. Instead, the CCP let Didi have their IPO, and right after the company went public, they announced a cybersecurity probe into Didi. They ordered Didi to not accept any new customers, and they deleted the app from the App Store. Let's just say Didi's IPO didn't go too well. Anyway, moving back to Jack Ma, on top of the CCP tearing down his companies, the Americans would decide that they wanted to jump in on the fun as well. For years, the SEC has been trying to crack down on Chinese companies by forcing regular American audits. You see, almost every year, one or two fraudulent Chinese companies make their way onto the American stock market and cause American investors to lose billions. The SEC believes that imposing audits could catch these frauds early on and save investors from getting scammed. Personally, I think this is a serious concern that does need to be addressed. But unfortunately for Jack, this couldn't have taken place at a worse time. At the end of 2020 and the beginning of 2021, the SEC really increased the pressure on Chinese companies. They basically made an ultimatum that they were going to delist Chinese companies from the US stock market if they didn't comply with SEC auditing. The CCP, of course, refused to cooperate. The SEC did give Chinese companies up until 2024 to comply, so there is still quite a bit of time left, and I'm not sure if things will actually escalate to delisting. Nonetheless, Chinese investors didn't want to hold on to their stocks that could potentially lose their American investors in the coming years. And American investors obviously didn't want to hold on to stocks that could get delisted. So everyone just started dumping all of their positions, and in the crossfire, Alibaba stock got annihilated. Since its peak last October, Alibaba stock is down over 50%. Even after all of this, the CCP still had more in store for Jack. In April, the CCP launched an investigation into Ant's relationship with the Shanghai Stock Exchange. With this investigation, the CCP was basically accusing the Ant Group of insider dealing and corruption. That same month, the CCP attacked Jack's university called Hapon University. Hapon University is an extremely prestigious and elite school in China founded by Jack Ma in 2015. It's not exactly an academic-centered university. It's more of a networking program for up-and-coming business leaders in China. The requirements to apply to the school include $4.5 million in revenue per year and a minimum of 30 employees, so the school was quite elite indeed. Jack was originally a teacher, so this was right down his alley. However, the CCP had some other plans. In April, the CCP forced the school to halt new enrollments. They would also force Jack to step down as president of the school, and they would force the school to drop university from its name. With the other parts of Jack's life dismantled, the CCP returned to screwing over the Ant Group. In June, China forced the Ant Group to create a new company called Chongqing Ant Consumer Finance, and this new company would absorb the most profitable parts of the Ant Group. The Ant Group was allowed to own a 50% stake in the company, but they had to pay for it. The Ant Group literally had to pay $625 million to own half of their own subsidiary. Meanwhile, a company called Huarong Asset Management was given 5% of the company for free. Huarong actually has a dark history of corporate corruption and bribery. In fact, their former CEO, Lai Zhaomin, was executed for bribery and corruption in January of this year. So it's quite odd that the CCP is forcing the Ant Group to work with Huarong. Maybe they're trying to get the Ant Group involved in some sort of scandal. Who knows? Unfortunately, that's still not the end of the story. Just 3 weeks ago, Alibaba quote-unquote donated $15.5 billion, or 1/3 of their entire cash reserves, to President Xi Jinping's Common Prosperity Fund. Hopefully, with this contribution, Jack will finally regain some freedom. Having heard how hard Jack's companies have gotten screwed over the past year, I suspect that you're no longer surprised to hear that his companies have lost $780 billion in valuation within 11 months. But it seems like Jack always knew that it would come down to something like this, as he said, quote, "I think among the richest men in China, few have good endings." Do you guys think Jack deserved his punishment? Comment that down below. Also, drop a like if you think Jack has been punished more than enough. And of course, consider joining our Discord community to suggest future video ideas, and consider subscribing to see more questions logically answered. But until then, I'm Hari, and I'll see you guys on the next one.